Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. I hope you're having a great day and I hope this video can make it a little bit better. Today we're going to be going over all of the new mechanics and cards, or at least the new champions coming out in the upcoming expansion. Now, if you enjoy all of the daily Path of Champions content, definitely like and subscribe and let's get into it. So up first, we have a new vocab, this story. So it's activatable once per round. When activated, play a skill of the current act, then transform to the next act. So these are landmarks that you drop on the board. As you can see right here, they have a spell or a skill speed. So when you play this, it'll put a effect on the stack that is slow. And this one here is focus speed. Now to activate them, just seems like you can click on them to activate them for that round. And so this is a interesting type of landmark. So we have here for the family reunion, grant a unit gloom. We'll get into that a little bit later. Grant an ally impact, or round 3, boost 2 units. So it is a interesting effect that every single round it's going to be doing something different for you, and it is nice that you can activate it on your own terms. So it's not like a countdown landmark which is just going to activate at the very start of the round. And these having spell speeds or skill speeds means they will actually be interactable, so who knows, the enemy might deny your effect right here. But a interesting set of landmarks. We also have the Light of Demacia, so grant an ally spirit. Next round, grant an ally spirit 2, because this is a keyword that can stack, or 3, boost all allies. So some interesting effects here. Let's further break down what some of these new keywords actually are. So spirit, you can see right here, this unit has 1/1. This keyword can stack. So similar to impact, how that can stack up, this is going to be a new keyword letting you buff up your units, just giving them this 1/1 stack. Now note that silence will remove all the stacks. So right here we see light feather, which essentially is just Ezreal. It's a 0/0. It has spirit and play, grant an ally in hand spirit. So really this is going to be a 1/1, but if it gets silenced, it's going to go back to its base form being a 0/0 and actually die because it has 0 health. We also have this Mage Seeker right here. So 5 cost, 2/3 challenger. When him summon, grant other ally spirit. So pretty weak stat line himself, but he's essentially buffing up your entire board by 1/1. So if you can play this on a full board, very nice. All right, another new vocab right here. Boost, increase allies positive stackable keywords or enemies negative stackable keywords. So boost, if your unit has either impact or spirit, it's going to increase those by 1, or at least 1 for each time you're boosting them. And enemies, if they have a negative stackable keyword, which we'll get into in a moment, you're going to increase that one by 1. So that's a new mechanic also coming. As you see here, tree spirits play boost all other units. So this is going to hit your board and the enemy board. Or the smoldering smirk, boost 2 allies, then they strike an enemy 1 after each other. So another new effect coming in this coming up patch. Now gloom, another keyword coming. This is the enemy stackable keyword. So this unit has -1/1. So the exact opposite of spirit. Spirit, your unit has 1/1, positive 1/1 that is. Gloom, the enemy has -1/1. And again, this is a stackable keyword. So if you have gloom on a unit and then you boost them, you'll increase that by 1/1. So solid effect right there. And this can kill enemy units if you get them down to 0. So that is going to be a very strong effect. For some cards they're showing off, Existential Dread, grant enemies gloom. So just hitting the entire enemy board, giving them all -1/1. Really strong right there. And we also have glare, so 2 cost slow, grant a unit gloom to draw 1. So pretty solid card, reducing down an enemy and having some extra draw. Last up then for new effects, we have sleep. So obliterate a unit and recall its attachments to store an exact copy in a landmark for 1 round. So unlike some other obliterates such as Lissandra's Entomb, which destroys all of your equipment and attachments, this won't do that. You're just going to save a copy of whatever card with all of their attachments. And it's just for a single round, so there's going to be a lot of interesting ways that we can use this, either to save our own units, regen their health, or to stop an enemy unit, keep them from getting the effects of a spell, maybe stop them from attacking. This will be a very versatile effect, especially with spells like this. So Blooming Bud, sleep a unit, so you can use this to either save one of your units or negatively affect an enemy unit. If you've played Kindred a lot, you can use a lot of the same mechanics with Kindred's champion spell and the spell you're generating from your second star power. a lot of those same combos you can use right here with this Blooming Bud. That's it for new mechanics though. Let's start diving into some of the new cards and champions. So up first here, we have Lux. And Lux is all focused around the Spirit and Boost mechanic, so trying to buff up your own units. So right here we have Lux Illuminated. It's a 3-cost 1/2, but it has that Spirit, so really it's going to be a 2/3. It's going to be nice being able to play this card a lot earlier. It has support, grant my supported ally Spirit, and give me Barrier this round. Very strong effect, so she can attack safely as long as she is supporting the unit, and she is getting some of that scaling off, which is quite nice. Now, level up, allies have attacked with or have gained while attacking 20 or more total positive keywords. So you really want to be stacking up all those keywords to level up your Lux. Now, once she levels, she goes to a 2/3, but again, that Spirit's increasing it by 1/1. Same effect of support, grant my supported ally Spirit and give me Barrier this round. And now when an ally gains Spirit, it gains it again. This is going to be really good, especially with her champion spell, Lux's Incandescent. So 3-cost fast, boost all units. So this is your unit and the enemy units. So if you have some negative effects on the enemy, you can boost those up as well, but you're mainly going to be using this to boost your own unit's Spirit as well as impact. Now, when Lux is leveled and you use this right here to give them all that extra Spirit, they're going to gain that again, which can be a very powerful effect. I think running Grand General's counterplan on Lux is definitely going to be a valid strategy. Now, as far as some of the cards coming out with Lux, we have the Lumino Sprite, so 2-cost 2/2, support, give my supported ally all of my positive keywords and their stacks this round. Really powerful effect right here. This is going to be a great card. Going to be very helpful for leveling up our Lux because we can try to buff up this card as much as possible and then have this card buff up another unit. Likely a solid strategy is going to have Lux support this card to increase its Spirit, and then this card can support the card next to it to also give all of those stacks to its supported ally. Really good. Anyways, we have Ezreal in Disguise right here. Light Feather, so 1-cost 0/0 with that Spirit. Play, grant an ally enhanced Spirit. Solid 1-drop, really helping you stack up. You can potentially play this round 1 and buff up your Lux, so she'll hit the board with 2 Spirit to be a little bit stronger. Next up then, we have Dream Light Alina, so 8-cost 1/1. When I'm summoned, summon 5 Spritelings, which you see right down here. Another 1-cost, which is essentially 2/2 because of the double Spirit. And it says for each ally there isn't space for, so you can only have 6 units on the board. This is 1 unit and it's summoning 5 more, so it's going to fill up your entire board. But for each one of those units that doesn't fit and gets obliterated, grant the weakest ally 2 Spirit instead. So great way to buff up your board because you can play this when you have a mostly full board and all those stacks can hit your other cards. Over here we have the Mage Seeker that we already talked about, granting your whole board Spirit. Really nice, especially if we play this after we have leveled up Lux, because when the whole board gets Spirit, they then get that Spirit again. Lux is really all about that scaling, and so having multiple ways to grant Spirit to your whole board, really solid. We also have the Smoldering Smirk that we talked about a little bit earlier, the Spritelings, and the Tree Spirit. So 4-cost 2/2, boost all of the units, and remember, this is hitting your board and the enemy board. So really solid support package, but let's actually go ahead and look at what cards are releasing in Lux's starting deck as well as star powers. So big shout out to Riot for releasing all of this before the patch came out. So first, let's talk about the support package. So we have Light Feather right over here. You see grant an ally enhanced Spirit. And then we also have Form Up. So this card, you can see it right here, 2-cost burst, give an ally 2/2 this round. So this is temporary, but it's going to be a very nice solid combat trick. So that is another spell we got right there. Then we got the Lumino Sprite, which we saw right over here. This is a great card to support, give my supported ally all my positive stats and keywords. So far, Lux having pretty good starting deck. Then we have the Vanguard Defender. So this is a card we've seen in a couple other decks, but it is pretty solid. You can see it right here. So 2-cost 2/2 and tough. Very simple and straightforward unit, but it's going to be a great unit to try to buff up. So while we've seen it in a couple other decks, still is pretty good, and it still fits with most of the other cards in here. Next up then, we have the Lorient Prodigy, so 3-cost, and this is also a card we've seen in a couple other decks, I think even in Lux's other starting deck. So you can see that right here, 3 cost 2, 4, and Challenger. A little bit boring because we've seen it in a couple other decks, but still a solid buff target and can help us have some good removal with that Challenger. So while it's a bit boring to see it again, it is a solid card. Up next then we have Lux, and then the Tree Spirits. So we see that right here, 4 cost 2, 2 in Spirit. Plate boost all other units, really solid right there, especially the fact that this play effect is hitting our board and the enemy board. Next for the support package, the Mage Seeker we've already talked about several times. When I'm summoned, grant all other ally spirit. Again, very solid card, especially if we can level up Lux before playing it, so we essentially double its effect. And then last up, we have the Smoldering Smirk, so a solid removal card, able to boost 2 of your units and have them strike enemy targets. So overall, I think Lux has a very solid support deck, but let's take a look at her star powers. So when an ally is targeted or supported, grant its spirit. I think this is pretty awesome. Glad we kind of have more of a support package. I don't think we've really was more of a support playstyle, so that's great to see, and this is going to give us some good scaling. Next up then, we have the Inspiring Presence, +1 starting mana, round start, create a Prismatic Barrier in hand. So that is Lux's 3 cost burst barrier spell. So a solid way to protect our own units. Again, probably going to play out somewhat similarly to like Mordekaiser, where you're saving your Deathless to be able to save and revive your units. So gonna play out fairly similar there, but create this Prismatic Barrier. If you already have one, reduces cost by 1. Solid effect, great way to save your units because you're gonna be a very unit focused deck, but this can also trigger your other star power to target an ally and grant it spirit. For the last star power then, when an ally is targeted or supported, grant it spirit and impact. That impact is going to be very strong because all the ways you're then boosting your units, you can increase that impact, giving you a lot of extra damage. And this will really help your Lux level up faster because she's all about gaining those extra keywords and stacking them up. So overall, pretty solid star powers and also a very good starting deck. Now the Defender and Prodigy, slightly disappointing to see them there because we've already seen those several times. I like how most of her deck is all new cards, and the form up, while it's not a new card, we at least haven't seen it in any other starting deck, so that is still a great addition. I think they did very well when designing Lux. I think she's going to be very strong, might struggle a little bit in Lysandra, but she'll have a great play style if you really like to scale up your deck and just have a lot of very strong units. Also, with Lux having some really solid early cards and herself only being a 3 cost, even though you're scaling, I think you'll really be able to get that scaling starting very early. And with that Prismatic Barrier, you can really save your units and make sure they don't die early. Also, you should have more safety to scale up, both because of your barrier and also because it just relies on you targeting your own units and playing your cards, whereas some other scaling decks like Garen, you have to actually hit enemies, or Kane, we have to kill enemy units. That can be really difficult, especially against some tough adventures like Lysandra. But for Lux, you don't really have to do that, so nice you can actually stay back and try to scale up until your units are actually powerful enough to take the fight to the enemy. Overall though, solid champion, well-designed star powers, and starting deck. I look forward to playing her in the upcoming patch. Next up then, let's talk about Vex. Now Vex is probably the one I am the most excited for. So up first, let's look at the champion themselves. So 4 cost, 5/4, really solid stat line. Fearsome, with the effect of attack, grant the strongest enemy Gloom. Now remember that Gloom is reducing down their stats by -1/1, and that is stackable. And then the level up is you've granted Gloom 5 different times. So should be pretty easy to level up, especially when you see the star powers. Now when they level up, they go to a 6/5, so again, really solid stats. When an enemy gains Gloom, it gains it again. So essentially the very inverse of Lux. Lux is all about buffing up your own units, and then when they get Spirit, they gain it again. Whereas Vex, all about debuffing the enemy, and when they gain Gloom, they gain it again, which is a very powerful effect. Now here we have Glare. We looked at this before. Not sure if it's their champion spell. Seems likely since it's dual region, and you see the dual region right here, and it's also literally their face. So probably their champion spell, but we don't have a guarantee. But 2 costs low, grant a unit Gloom to draw 1. Having some built-in draw is pretty good, so you might want to run Grand General's Counterplan so you can generate this every single round. Next up though, we have Gloom Sprite, so 1 cost, 2/2, strike, grant me impact. So solid stat line for a 1 cost, and the ability to just keep scaling as long as it can keep getting strikes off, and that will help to give it to be a boost target so you can further increase that impact if you want. Next up though, we have Grotesque Gift. So 2 cost 1/1 with Spirit, so it's actually going to be a 2/2. The first time an enemy is summoned, grant it Gloom. Again, great effect. You can play this, then the next time the enemy summons a unit, it just immediately goes down by 1/1. Great and helpful for leveling up our Vex. Next up then, we have the Family Reunion. This is the story landmark we already talked about. So either grant a unit Gloom, and the next round grant an ally impact, and then finally boost 2 units. So either boost up your own unit's impact and spirit, or boost the enemy to increase their Gloom stacks. Next up then, we have Beefcake Mayor. So 4 cost 3/4 with impact, and then round start boost me. So this is going to be increasing its impact every round. Probably want to try to find a way to throw spirit on this so that it will also be increasing that spirit every round as well. But solid card and can really become a formidable opponent. Next up then, we have Grim. So 6 costs, so fairly expensive, but 5/3 fearsome. Play, grant a unit 4 Gloom. That's actually a pretty crazy effect, especially considering this unit has a pretty solid stat line for such a powerful play effect, because you're then hitting an enemy with essentially -4/4. So really, if you think about it, this unit is a 5/3, but it's reducing down an enemy by -4/4. So you can almost think of this card as a 9/7 as far as stats between the ones you're getting and the amount you're reducing from the enemy. So pretty crazy card and actually worth that price. Next though, we have Shadow. So 5 costs 2/5 fearsome. When I'm summoned, draw Vex. I have 1 power for each different time you've granted Gloom this game. So this is going to be a very large scaling card. Definitely one to look out for, especially because it can be a draw engine for your Vex. Really good. Last up then, here we have Existential Dread. So we looked at this earlier. 4 cost slow, grant enemies Gloom. So being able to hit the entire enemy board. Honestly, if the enemy has a full board, you can just play this and probably level up your Vex. Really strong, especially if you have Vex leveled up. When the enemy gains Gloom, it gains it again. And with Vex, I think if you get slow but steady, so all your slow spells are doubled, you're going to have a very good time. So this was the support package that released with Vex, but let's actually take a look at their starting deck and star powers. So up first, we have the Gloom Sprites as a 1 cost. Now, we already saw that right here, the 1 cost 2/2, strike, grant me impact, so really good 1 cost. Then we have the Pie Toss. Now, this is probably one you've seen before. It's not in any other starting decks, but at least I find it fairly often in Path of Champions. You can see it right here. 1 cost fast, deal 1 to a unit, and then create the Perilous Pastry in hand. See that right here. 2 cost slow, deal 1 to anything. So a nice little way to target enemy units and deal a little bit of damage. This will hopefully get some added damage from your level ups, because as you level up, your deck is going to get some items on there. Normally for something like this, they increase the damage, which would actually be pretty useful. So solid addition. Next up then, we see the Conkologist. You see that right here. 2 cost 2/1. Play, manifest a spell from your regions that cost 2 or less. Now this card is fine. I find it definitely out of place thematically with the rest of the deck, so that's disappointing. And also, I believe we have this in another champion's starting deck. If not, it's a card we see really often, so kind of boring to have this in the starting deck, but overall still an okay card. Next up then, we have the Grotesque Gift. So we looked at this right here, the 2 cost, essentially 2/2 with that spirit, and that can grant an enemy Gloom. Solid 2-drop for you. Then we have the Family Reunion. That's the story landmark we've looked at a couple times at this point right here. Next up, we have Alea. So this is a card that they haven't actually revealed yet as far as what the card actually is, but we see a glimpse of it in one of the trailers. And the stats that it had at the time was a 3/3 with impact and spirit. Now we don't know if it has any sort of play effect or if it had been affected by any other card, but that's probably roughly what this card will be, which should be solid. Not really interacting with your Gloom mechanic, but still a decent card, and it's a new card, which is very nice. Now for 4 cost, we have Beefcake Mayor. So you see right here, the round start boost me with impact. Solid unit, especially if you can throw spirit on it, so that it's just going to be also increasing its stats every round. Then we have Vex, and then last up we have Grim. So that 6 cost with grant an enemy unit 4 Gloom, which is pretty crazy. Well, technically you can grant your own unit 4 Gloom if you wanted, but very solid play effect. So overall, the support deck, or starting deck that is pretty good. Now, not a huge fan of the Conkologist, but really that's the only card that's very much out of place. All the rest I think fit in pretty well, and all the rest are new cards other than the Pie Toss, which, while not a new card, isn't in any other starting decks, and I think it works out pretty well here. Now, as far as the star powers, so we have round start. If you have the attack token, boost all enemies. This is going to be very good. It is happening every other round to start off, but if you have Gloom on the enemies, then at the start of the round, they are now being reduced down by another 1/1. And remember, if you have your Vex on the board and leveled, when an enemy gains a stack of Gloom, it gains it again. So you can potentially be hitting the entire enemy board with a negative 2/2. First at every other round, because it's just when you have the attack token at round start, but it'll go to just every round start, potentially boosting the entire enemy board by negative 2/2, which could be pretty crazy. And now for the craziest effect, we actually have the 2-star +1 starting mana. Damage to enemies is dealt in the form of Gloom, which is pretty insane because one of the strongest defensive powers in the game is called Enfeebling Strike. And what that does is when you deal damage to a unit, you also reduce down their power by the damage dealt. So you're essentially doing that to the enemy because that Gloom is reducing down both their health and power. So this will make it very easy to level up your Vex, because your Vex, you've granted Gloom 5 different times. So essentially, you've done damage 5 different times if you have your second star power. And so just all the damage you do, including your poke damage from spells, so like Pie Toss, all of that is just able to reduce down the enemies and stack up your Gloom on them. So you're going to want to try to hit every single enemy unit just so that they have a stack of Gloom, so that at round start, they will then just keep getting reduced down even more. So this is going to be an incredibly powerful effect. And so I think Vex is not going to have any problems with any content in the game, including Lysandra. I think Vex will be very strong. And because of this, I think you might want to run something such as like maybe a couple Stalker's Blades on Vex. They have a very good stat line. And so just having them hit the board, even if you don't kill them, they're now going to be much weaker since their power is going to be greatly reduced. Also, this next part is going to be speculation, but since your damage is being essentially converted into Gloom, Gloom might not trigger damage effects. So there's a lot of opponents, especially in the Lysandra Adventure, that when they take damage, they like double their power. Or if they have I Am Inevitable, they're granted Tough, and then they're granted 2/2. Potentially, if your damage isn't technically damage, but is Gloom, you might not trigger those effects, which means you just hard counter them. Now, that part is speculation, but if that does happen, that would be absolutely insane. Overall, a very well-made deck. This is the champion I'm actually looking forward to the most, and I think they're also going to be the strongest. Last up then, we have Lilia. So 3 cost 2/1, but it does have boost, so it's really going to be like a 3/2, and it has that quick attack. Now, when I'm summoned or strike, create a Dream-Laden Bow in hand, or if you have one, reduce its cost by 1. So you see that right here, 2 cost, sleep an ally. This is slow though, so you can't be reactive with this. If an enemy's playing a spell at you to try to kill your unit, it's not like you can save them with this card. But still, very cheap. You can get this down even cheaper. Will be very solid. Now, the level up condition is you've summoned 15 allies or landmarks. Remember, when you sleep a unit, it turns into a countdown 1 landmark. And then when she levels up, now when you sleep another ally, immediately wake it up and grant it spirit. So you're putting it into a countdown 1 landmark, and then you're immediately awakening it. So essentially you can just get all the benefits without any of the downsides, because then you're not actually losing your unit, and you can immediately trigger all those summon effects again, give it spirit, or just save your unit from a spell by canceling it out by putting them in the landmark and then immediately taking them out of it. So this is actually a very powerful effect, and Lilia will actually be pretty good for being able to print herself. So she'll be able to play, strike, make this spell. You can then play it, and then you could play another Lilia while the other one is technically in the landmark. So you can get multiple on the board at the same time. This can be a very powerful effect, especially if you have 2 leveled up on the board. Potentially when you sleep one of them, the other can immediately wake them up. So this can be very powerful, especially with something like Stalker's Blade, where you can sleep one, immediately have it wake up, get 2 strikes off, make another one of these spells, and you can just keep repeating. I think there's going to be some very crazy things we can do with this champion. Let's continue on though. So we have the Blooming Bud. This is her champion spell. 3 cost fast. Create sleep a unit, so yours or the enemies, then create a Lilia in your deck. Really solid card. This one is actually fast, so you can be reactive with it. If the enemy is trying to play something at one of your units, you can sleep your unit to save them, or you can sleep an enemy unit to fizzle an attack, stop a block, keep them from getting targeted by a spell. A lot of different ways you can use this, but it's going to be very powerful. Next up then, we have the Dewdrop Harvest. So this is another story landmark. It's slow. Summon a Spriteling, so that's that 1 cost 2/2, or 1 cost 0/0 with double spirit. Or round 2, sleep a ally. Next up then, we have the Petal Pixie. So when I'm summoned, summon a Spriteling. So again, 1 cost with double spirit. Solid card, and this will work well with your sleep mechanic because it has a summon effect. Is when I'm summoned, summon a Spriteling. Your landmarks, when they count down and the person awakens, they will trigger their summon effects again. So this would be a great addition to your deck. Next up then, the Sprite Mother. So 4 cost 2/1. When I'm summoned, grant other Spritelings and Sprite Mothers everywhere Spirit. So pretty weak stat line, but if you're able to keep summoning this, which you can with your sleep mechanic, you can really be scaling up all your Spritelings and all of your Spirit Mothers. So pretty strong right there. These two together could give you a very powerful combination of just summoning a lot of Spritelings and buffing them all up. Moving on though, we have the Gardener. So 3 cost 2/4, play fully heal an ally, then sleep it. It's a great way to protect your own units. Next up, we have the Sprite Dance. So 3 cost fast, recall an ally to grant all stacks of its spirit to another ally. So if you were able to really buff up one of your Spritelings with a lot of spirit, then you can just recall one of those Spritelings, which is just a 1 cost, move all that spirit over to another unit, really able to buff them up. It almost plays similar to equipment where you're just moving these stacks around between your units, which could be very powerful. Last up then, we have the Heart of the Tree. So another story landmark. This one, focus speed, heal your Nexus 3 and summon a Spriteling. Second round, grant allies everywhere spirit. So now it's just all of your units have an extra 1/1. Really solid. And last up, manifest a card that costs 8 or more, reduce its cost by half, rounded up. So pretty interesting landmark right there. So this is Lilia's support package. I think it's overall pretty solid and could give you a very interesting Spriteling gameplay. Unfortunately, this is not her starting deck at all. So if we take a look at the starting deck, we have the Spritelings. Again, that's the 1 cost with double spirit, so 1 cost 2/2. Then next we have the Green Glade Lookout for some reason. So this is the 2 cost 2/2. I believe this is in several other unit starting decks, and it just has strike, reduce the cost of the most expensive unit in hand by 1. Like, it's a fine enough card, but it doesn't really fit in with any of the rest of the cards other than the fact it's Ionian, and seems like a very random addition to the deck. Really not sure why they decided to add this in. Unfortunately, it doesn't get much better from here. So next we have Keeper of the Mast. So 2 cost 2/3. When I'm summoned, give other allies 1 power this round. So it does have a summon mechanic. So being able to summon this from the landmark can help your board. Again, doesn't really fit with any of the rest of the cards thematically, which is a bit weird. And also, this is a really old and kind of boring card. They've added so many awesome cards to the game. I really want them to use more of those in these starting decks. I'm not sure why they're using either cards we've seen a million times before in other starting decks, or cards that were just been in the game since the very beginning and, to be honest, aren't overly exciting. Next though, we have the Dewdrop Harvest. So that's that story landmark you see right here. 2 cost, summon a Spriteling or sleep an ally in the next round. Next up then, we have Lilia as a 3 cost, and then we have the Shadow Assassin as another 3 cost. Now the Shadow Assassin, we've seen this many times. It's in a lot of different decks, both the enemies as well as some of our other champion starting decks. 3 cost 2/1 elusive. When I'm summoned, draw 1. So it's a solid card, elusive, good keyword to have, and then draw 1 when I'm summoned. You'll be able to trigger this multiple times from your sleep effect, so it could be a good draw engine. The issue is, again, really doesn't fit in this theme of Lilia or any of her support cards, so really weird that it's in this deck. Next though, we have the Coastal Defender. Again, this is a card that is in at least one, but potentially several other starting decks. So 4 cost 2/6. When you summon another ally, give me 2 power this round. Kind of feel like some of the people at Riot saw like, oh, summon, let's throw it in. This card is fine, boring, and we've already seen and played with it many other times before, and in the other decks it's even in, it isn't really that fun to play with, so pretty disappointing to see it here, to be honest. After that, we have Concussive Palm, yet another card we've seen in multiple decks. I know it's both in the Yasuo as well as the Lee Sin starting deck. So it's a fine card, 4 cost, stun an enemy to summon a Tail of the Dragon. So you see that right here. So it's a solid card. It's just, again, pretty boring because we've seen it in multiple other starting decks, which I think Riot should try to avoid if at all possible. If a card is in a champion starting deck, they shouldn't use it in any other starting decks if they have any other options. So again, a little weird seeing this in another starting deck. But let's carry on. Last up, we have the Dreamlight Alina, I'm not sure. But this is one of the cards in the Lux support package, which is interesting. So you see that right here, 8 cost Spirit. When I'm summoned, summon 5 Spritelings. For each one there isn't space for, grant the weakest ally 2 Spirit. So a decent card, but again, part of the Lux support package, so a little weird that they're adding it to Lilia instead of Lux. Overall, I don't really understand this starting deck. I think it's pretty terrible, especially because we have 2 costs that they're adding that feel completely out of place, and we have a 4 cost right here. Instead of adding these, I don't know why they didn't just add the 2 and 4 costs that literally released with Lilia, because we have the Petal Pixie and the Sprite Mother, a 2 and a 4 cost that fit both perfectly thematically as well as gameplay wise, because it's literally part of Lilia's support package. So don't have really any idea why they decided not to add these in to the starting deck. Instead, they add in other cards that feel completely out of place. So for the first 2 decks, they were pretty good. For the Lux one, there was 2 cards that were reused from other starting decks, which isn't great. And then there was 1 card that, while it was an older card that didn't release this expansion, at least it was new to starting decks and would fit Lux's playstyle very well. Also, all of those cards still fit in pretty well thematically with Lux, so I thought that was pretty good. And then with Vex, we have the Concologist, which a bit out of place, but that was really the only card. While the Pytos isn't a new card, I think it fit pretty well with that deck. So again, for Vex, pretty well made deck where most of the cards are all new and fitting the theme. But for Lilia here, only 4 out of the 9 cards are actually new, which seems very odd. The other 5 are cards that are really old. They're all ones that like released when the game first came out, and most of them, 4 out of that 5, are in other unit starting decks and even in multiple other champion starting decks. So this deck seems very weird, and also it's all over the place as far as theme, which I don't know how much it matters to other people, but for me, it is pretty important for decks to be consistent thematically. So this starting deck is definitely the worst out of all of them in my opinion. Now, yes, you might get some items from leveling up that makes this a lot better, but in my opinion, even if this is the strongest deck in the game because it gets a whole bunch of crazy upgrades, still doesn't really matter. To me, if the deck is incoherent thematically, then it's still going to be a bad deck. So really disappointed right here. And even one of the new cards you're getting is part of the Lux support package instead of one of your own. For Lilia herself, the only cards she's actually getting that are part of her own support package is the Dewdrop Harvest and the Spriteling. So 2 cards out of the 9 other than herself, of course. It's really weird. Anyways, I'll stop talking about the starting deck, even though I think it's terrible. Let's look at these star powers. So when you summon a unit without playing it, grant it Spirit. So essentially, when you're going to summon your units from your landmark, you're going to grant it Spirit. But there's actually a lot of ways you can summon units without playing them in Path of Champions, so this will be a pretty strong effect. Next up though, we have the +1 starting mana and round start. Create a Blooming Bud in hand. If you already have one, reduce its cost by 1. Now that Blooming Bud you see right here, this is her champion spell, and so sleep a unit. Really strong because this is fast, so again, you can be reactive with this. And you can target your own units or enemy units. So this will actually be a very strong second star power. For the last star power then, when you summon a unit without playing it, grant its Spirit twice. So just buffing up all your summoned units, which is then further buffing up your sleep mechanic, because you sleep them, you put them in the landmark, and then you wake them up so they get summoned again without you playing them. So essentially, whenever you're sleeping your unit, you're giving it or granting it 2/2 from this Spirit right here. This will also be decent with like the Concussive Palm, because that's a unit you're summoning but not playing. That's going to be a bit stronger. Overall, I think this will be pretty strong as far as star powers. It'll give you an interesting playstyle of really focusing on any ways to summon units without playing them. There's a lot of powers and effects that can do that in Path of Champions. And then this blooming bud right here is going to be very good. You're going to play very similar to Kindred, because a lot of the things you can do with Kindred's star power is going to work the exact same here. So the star powers are solid, and I think Lilia herself is a very solid unit, and there's going to be a lot of interesting new things you can do here, especially because you can just essentially print her multiple times by putting her to sleep and then playing another copy of her. A lot of people saying she's probably the reason why the Lost Chapter got nerfed, because since you can summon her so many times, you could trigger and get all that spell mana so often. So I think she is going to be very good, and I think her star powers are also good. The deck itself, I think it will be able to play pretty well. There are some powerful effects here that you can abuse with your summon mechanics. I think the deck overall, though, as far as design, was poorly done in my opinion. It was really giving me Nasus vibes, which is not good. If you remember, Nasus had units from like every other champion supporting deck. Like his one cost is from the Renekton support package. He has another one from the Zillion support package. He has one from the Sivir support package. Out of all the followers with Nasus, he only has one unit that's actually from his support package. And with Lilia, we kind of have that again, with just having the Spriteling being the only follower that's part of her support package. So really strange and odd, especially because we see other cards that would be perfect to release with her. Really don't know why they did that. Very disappointing. But still, I think she'll be a solid champion. And I think all three of them will be great additions to the game overall. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these three new champions. Also, thank you to Riot for releasing these starting decks as well as these star powers early. Really awesome to see that. I look forward to covering all of this, putting out guides and gameplay videos for all these champions. So if you don't want to miss that, definitely like and subscribe. And I hope you all have a great day.